If you can spend anywhere between $100 and $200 on a new pair of football boots, you can actually find some of the best models on the market. So in this video, we're gonna have some fun and rank the best boots you can get under $200. And I'm also gonna highlight all the unique features of these boots so you can understand which of them might be best for you. And for all the boots we discuss, I'll leave links to them in the description where you can find them on sale with discount codes. So without further ado, let's get into the rankings. All right, guys, and kicking things off with the first boot on our list, we have one of my favorites. It's the New Balance 442 V2 Pro. Now, this is going to be one of the most traditional and simple boots on this entire list, and it's also the only leather football boot that New Balance sells. Now, I should warn you, they are starting to integrate some synthetic models into the 442 series, but as of now, at least in this colorway, which is basically white with some orange accents, you are going to get a full kangaroo leather toe box, and then also some synthetic elements throughout the tongue and the rest of the boot. But basically, these come in weighing just over 200 grams, making them almost as light as a Mercurial Elite series. So they're extremely lightweight football boots. They basically feel like a leather speed boot. And my favorite thing about the 442s is going to be the toe box. They're just incredibly wide. Now, these are the wide variation. You can basically get them in a standard or a wider variation. Even the standard is going to be wider than most other boots that you can find. They fit really comfortably. There's a little bit of break-in time, I'll warn you, near the heel area. I think they could have done with a little bit more padding just towards the back of the boots. But if you're a wide-footed player and you like leather football boots, the 442 is a great option. So for that, I'm going to go A tier for the 442s. Now, next up, speaking of the Nike Mercurials, we have the Nike Vapor 16 Pro. So I don't have the Elite model on this list because the full retail of the Elite is going to be about $260. But I'll let you guys in on something. I actually prefer in many ways the Pro model that you see here. Now, I know some people aren't a big fan of the highlighter colorway I got here. I actually kind of vibe with the yellow. A little bit too flashy on the pitch though, I understand. But one thing I really like about the Pro model versus the Elites is that you actually have a really slick coating, almost a matte finish, if you will, to the upper on the Pros, whereas on the Elites, you get Nike's new grip knit material, which for me, sometimes when I'm wearing, speed boot like the Mercurial, I actually don't really want to have that crazy sticky upper. I want something that has a more slick finish where I'm not going to get the ball like stuck under my feet when I'm dribbling. And so for me, I think the Pros are just a better value option at around $160. They're basically $100 cheaper than the Elites, but you're getting all the same build quality and the same performance. I have these in the artificial grass version here, which I like just because I play on AG most of the time, and those chevron studs can be a little bit too aggressive. Nike has made the AG version really widely available, so pretty much wherever you live, you should be able to get a pair. And for me, I would put the Vapor 16 Pros just below the 442s, but still in the A tier. They're one of the best value boots that Nike sells. And if you're looking for that classic Mercurial feeling and you don't really care about having that grip knit upper, I would save the $100 and go with the Vapors. They are going to be a snug fitting football boot. So if you have tremendously wide feet or wider than the average, there's probably going to be better options on this list from New Balance or maybe even Adidas. But if you've got average to narrower feet, these are going to be a great choice. Just the classic Mercurial, a great speed boot. Next up in our list, we have a model from Adidas. These are going to be the Copa Gloro 2. I'm really upset I didn't get this colorway in for review. I had a black Gloro 2 with red accents. This one is white with red accents. It really reminds me of the Predators that David Beckham used to wear like back 15, 20 years ago. But the Copa Gloro 2 is another simple traditional design. It's a full calf leather football boot, so not kangaroo leather. And the full retail price for the Gloro 2 when it came out was $99, so just under $100. But now I just checked, and a lot of the different colorways, they're currently selling for $80. So this boot, you can even find it for under $100. And it fits, I'd say, average to maybe slightly on the wider side of average. So you're going to get some room in the toe box. And because it is a leather boot, it's going to stretch a little bit over time. But I will say, compared to some other leather boots on this list, like the 442 that we talked about, as well as the Premier 3 from Nike, as well as the Adler Lenzo and other boots from Mizuno, It's a little bit more bulky and has a bit more padding. For some players, that's going to be fine and you won't mind it. Personally, I like leather boots that just have a slightly thinner feel and give me a more sensitive touch. So for me, for the Copa Gloro 2, I'd put them pretty comfortably in B tier. Still a really solid football boot and great value for money. Now next up, we are moving back over to Nike with probably the most visually stunning boot on this list. Definitely, I'd say in the top 3 in terms of looks on this list. This is the TMO Legend 10 Emerald Pro. So it's the Pro Edition, and more specifically, this is the Emerald colorway that came out a few months ago. You can still find this version available. It had 2 releases. There was this in the Emerald version, and then there was a Pearl version, which was kind of white instead of this fluorescent green. And not only does this boot look great, but it's also extremely comfortable. I do think it's one of the most comfortable boots that Nike offers. I've tried the Pro versions of the Vapor 16, the Phantom GX2, and the TMO Legend 10, and I just think the TMO is the most comfortable. The TMO used to be a leather series. They recently transitioned to synthetic, so you're not going to find leather on the new TMO Legend 10 Pro. Instead, they have this fly touch material, but I'll be honest, guys, it feels pretty good. And I'm not really biased when it comes to leather versus synthetic uppers. Generally, I sometimes just find leather boots to be more comfortable, but if a synthetic boot is comfortable, I'm fine with it, and I'll play with it, any day of the week. The Legend 10 upper is very, very comfortable. It's extremely thin. It even has the same kind of micro textured pattern that you would find on natural leather. I think it's pretty impressive Nike were able to get that in this boot. And yeah, they've got a soft sock-like inner liner that just kind of adds to the comfort throughout the boot. And they have a relatively average width. Not the widest boot you can find, but I'd say a touch wider than the Vapor 16 and the Phantoms. For me, the Legend 10 Emerald is going to be A tier, and I'm gonna put it right in between the 442s and the Vapor 16 Pros. The next, another model from Nike here that I tried a few months ago, we got the Phantom GX2 Pro, and I also tried these out in the artificial grass variation. So the GX2 Pro, what do you need to know about this football boot? It is, for one, just like the Vapor 16s that we talked about. The Elite models have grip knit, so the Phantom GX2 Elite is going to have that really sticky upper. The GX2 Pro, which is about $100 cheaper, is not going to have that sticky upper. So instead, you're going to have a much more slick finish to the upper. It's going to be way less sticky, and despite it being not quite as sticky, you are still going to have the textural elements that you get in the Elite version. And what do I mean by that? There's basically ridges. I'd say it's a pretty wavy upper, right? So there's these series of concentric circles that radiate out from the center of the boots, and it's got this really nice ridged texture to it. And that alone gives you a decent amount of grip when you're, hitting long balls, going for those curve shots that you're trying to hit, like upper 90, no pun intended. And they're pretty comfortable boots. They're wider throughout the midfoot compared to the Vapor 16s, which are very snug throughout, but they still come to a point in the toe box, just like the Vapors. So they're not, stunning for wide feet. But I'll note that for the Phantom specifically, I kind of, their entire image for the Phantoms is that they're a very grippy football boot. So I was really expecting these to have the grip knit material, and when they didn't, I was a little bit disappointed. They're still really solid football boots. I still think that they sit in a weird middle ground, kind of between the TMOs and the Vapors in Nike's series. I think a lot of players will love them, and if aesthetically you like the Phantoms more than the Vapors, the fit is quite similar. And so if you would appreciate that slight added width throughout the midfoot, you might find the Phantoms to be a better football boot. But for me, I'm going to put them B tier, but still above the Copa Gloro 2s. So B tier, but high on the B tier. Definitely still a really solid football boot. You can find them for around $160, depending on the colorway. Next up, this is a true heavy hitter from Adidas. For those who don't know, just based on the colorway here, this is the Adidas F50 Messi Pro. So this is the second tier takedown for Adidas's F50 Messi series. And it can be a little bit complicated with all the F50s that Adidas has come out with, because they came out with a standard line that has, the Elite, Pro, and League. And then they had the Messi line with the Elite, Pro, and League as well. So you've got over 6 different variations of F50s floating out there. But they really nailed it with pretty much every single one. The new F50 series is so good, and I've been pretty critical of like various Adidas models that have come out over the past few years. I actually wasn't a huge fan of the Adidas Predator Elite. I actually haven't even tested out the Pros, which is why they're not on this list at the moment. Hopefully I'll get to review them soon. But I wasn't a huge fan of the new Predators. I wasn't a huge fan of the Copa Pure 2 either. But the F50, completely different story. I think they completely captured the essence of what F50 is all about, being a thin, lightweight speed boot, but they didn't compromise on comfort. I found every single variation of this boot, all the way from the Elite version to the Pro to the League, to be extremely comfortable. And I selected the Messi Pro version here specifically because the upper on the Messi version is going to be a little bit different than the standard. You're going to have this hybrid touch material, and to me, it feels like synthetic leather. So if you've ever tried on or seen the TMO Legend 10 that we just talked about, that is kind of reminiscent of what the upper's like on the Messi version of the F50s. It's got just this soft, natural feel to it that I usually only get with leather boots. It's still extremely thin. It's really comfortable. The tongue has an interesting design. They call it a burrito tongue. It's basically attached at one side of the boot and free at the other, and so it wraps across the top of your feet. And the lockdown from the heel area is great. It pretty much nails everything you want to from a football boot, from a comfort and performance aspect. And I have relatively wide feet, and these accommodated me pretty well. I'd say they're a touch wider than most models from Nike, maybe just a touch under most models from New Balance in terms of width. But overall, I was pretty blown away from the F50. I really hope Adidas don't change much going into the next model cycle. That's how good these were. And they're going to be our first S-tier boot today, just because they were just so well executed. And I will say, I reviewed the gold version, but this new chameleon version that I have shown here, so clean. Probably one of the best colorways that I think Adidas has right now. Now next, we've got the Nike Premier 3s, which I actually already included in the video I did Best Football Boots Under $100, where I did a similar tier list, because the Premier 3s technically retail for a full price of $120, but you can find them anywhere from $120 down to $90 or so, just depending on the colorway. But they are an amazing leather football boot. My pair is currently being loaned to a friend who pretty much destroyed his football boots, and they split in two, and we ended up being the same size. But as far as a simple, no frills leather boot, the Premier 3 does everything that you want it to. It's also impressively was made with kangaroo leather for years and years and years, up until I think like 2022, early 2023. Now some newer models are actually switching over to calf leather instead of kangaroo leather. The most recent Premier 3 I reviewed had calf leather, but honestly, I could hardly tell the difference between the kangaroo and the calf leather. They both felt really soft. The Premier 3 is just a very soft leather football boot. And I also like that it's a bit less bulky than the Copa Gloros as well. It's still got that retro design with the fold over tongue, although it is optional whether or not you want to remove it. With my pair, I kept the fold over tongue on for about 3 months. And then once I got tired of it, I just like cut it off along the lines. And it's cool because it makes the boots look a lot more modern. I also think the Premier 3s have some of the coolest colorways that Nike have on offer. The white with the green accents that I reviewed and have shown here looks absolutely class. And because now it's Nike's only leather football boot, it's going to stretch over time. So unlike a lot of their synthetic models, you can get more room in the toe box as you wear them. And that probably makes them, from a fit perspective, the most accommodating boot Nike make. I think there's some more durable and slightly higher quality leather boots on this list, but I still think that the Premier 3 is deserving of an A-tier placement. Even though there's more expensive, slightly more premium boots on this list, I'm putting it right up there, and I'm going to put it just behind the Vapor 16 Pro. But just because I put them there, you know, if you have slightly wider feet, you actually may prefer the fit you get from the Premiers, but someone looking for a thinner, more streamlined speed boot, you might like the Vapor 16 Pros. Now, next up, we got a boot that's given the Tiempos a real run for money in terms of aesthetic. This is the Mizuno Melia 2 Elite, which I actually have right here in the white and red version, which also looks pretty stunning. Like, this is also, I haven't like put too many miles on this boot yet, so it still looks pretty clean too. Most of my white football boots, I absolutely like run into the ground. But this version I have shown here, the white with the blue accents, I don't think it was released when I got my pair, but damn, those look so good. The Mizuno Melia 2 is going to be pretty much just a more premium version of the Premier 3. It actually has a similar shape, silhouette, and design aesthetic to it in terms of like that full leather upper, but the quality of the leather is just a little bit higher. The softness, it just feels a bit more premium, especially towards the toe box. I also think the stitching is just better done on the Morelias compared to the Premier 3. And unlike the made in Japan Mizuno Melia 2, which retails for close to $300, it's around $275, you can find the Mizuno Melia 2 Elite for around $150 to $160, again depending on the colorway. And you may have to, you know, search a few different sites before you can find them, but from my experience, the only difference between the Elites and the made in Japan is essentially the location that they're assembled. Now, I think some people have commented that the quality of leather is a little bit better on the made in Japans, but I've tried both, you know, in hand and felt the difference between the leather. It's very, very negligible as far as the differences. The Melia 2 Elite is an amazing football boot, and in my opinion, it's going to be an S-tier boot. It's, in terms of build quality, comfort, you know, timeless design. I mean, this is a football boot that you could pretty much recommend to anybody under any condition, and they would have a great experience playing in these boots. There's literally no one who I think would be upset with a purchase. Like, as long as you go true to size and find, you know, whatever sizing works best for you, there's no one that would be upset with these boots. So they're going to earn a spot up there with the F50 Messi Pros, just one spot a little bit higher, but definitely an S tier boot. Now, going over to the other side of the spectrum here, this one was tough. This is the Under Armour Magnetico Pro 4. Now, if you asked me last year about the Magnetico Pro 3, it would have done a little bit better on this list, potentially gotten a B tier or an A tier, but unfortunately the Magnetico Pro 4 was pretty disappointing. It was really lacking in lockdown, so they didn't feel that secure around the ankle or the heel area, despite the fact that there wasn't that much room in the toe box. So even if you size down half a size, they still don't have a lot of security, and that's one of the most important things I look for in a football boot. And with that being said, they retail full price for $140, and you can find much better football boots for less money. So I personally wouldn't really recommend them to many people, and for that reason, unfortunately, I'm putting them C tier. I really hope that the next version is a little bit better, because at $140, you really want a football boot to be hitting all of those marks in terms of comfort and lockdown, and the Magnetico Pro 4 is just not quite there yet. Now, next up, we're going to our second model from Mizuno, another Elite version from them. This is the Neo 4 Beta Elite, which I've talked about a lot on this channel. It is a pretty thoroughly designed and executed speed boot. I'm pretty impressed just how many different elements they pack into this single model. So they've got a really soft leather toe box, and then a stretchy sock-like knit material running underneath the lacing system, a razor-thin synthetic that's towards the side of the boots here, and then a soft padded microfiber heel liner. They really left no boxes unchecked when making these boots. They feel really great on feet. They run a little bit long, I found. So in my standard size 10.5 US, I had a little bit of extra space towards the front. So it could be worth either going true to size or potentially down a half size if you find yourself in between. They're great football boots. I will note that in terms of personal preference, I slightly prefer the Melia 2 just because it has a slightly more relaxed feel to it. I found that the sole plate on the Neo 4 betas here was just a little bit too rigid for me, and over time I just got the slightest bit of fatigue playing in them. Now some people did note that sometimes the sole plate can kind of break in a little bit in terms of stiffness over time, so that's an important factor to consider. But I would still say that these are just a touch under the Melia 2s for me, the Neo 4 Beta Elite. They also run for 150, but I'm going to put them B tier, and I'm going to A tier rather, because they're absolutely on the same level as something like the Vapor 16s, as well as the TMO Legend 10s. If you're someone who likes those boots from Nike, say if you worn Mercurials for most of your life or F50s, and you really like those thin minimalist speed boots, if you want to try something a little bit different from a brand you haven't tried before, go for the Neo 4 Beta Elite. It's basically, Mizuno's take on something like a Mercurial Vapor. That's what you're getting with this. It's much better, in my opinion, than the Mizuno Alpha, which is the other speed boot that they make, which is kind of funny. I just realized now that I forgot to put the Mizuno Alpha on this list. If it was here, it would probably go B tier or C tier. It's not my favorite in terms of Mizuno's offering. If you want a leather speed boot from them, go for the Neo 4 Beta. And then if you want a more traditional leather boot, go for the Melia 2. All right, next up, we're finally here at another one of my favorite boots, not just of the past year, but probably one of my favorite boots that I've ever tried on. This is the Adler Lenzo, one of my current go-tos. I also just washed it recently. I also played with it in the rain, so you can tell it's a little bit whiter than it was last time I brought them out. So Adler Lenzos, these are coming out of a smaller company in Japan, so not quite as big as Mizuno and AS6, who are pretty much like the giant sportswear manufacturers over there. Mizuno only makes, Adler only makes football boots. So they're not, and that's not to knock, Nike, Adidas, or, Mizuno or AS6, who are these huge companies. But this is the only thing that they put all their research, development, and time into. It's just football boots and nothing else. And they have 4 core models. And the reason why I went with the Lenzos was because they're pretty much advertised as the speed boot equivalent from Adler's line. So I believe that they're the thinnest and the lightest boot that they stock. And I was just blown away from these boots, blown away by these boots from the moment I got them. In terms of leather quality, I think they're pretty much unrivaled on this list. The only one who has a shout to compete would maybe be the Mizuno Melia Elites here. But I just love the thinness of the leather you get from the Lenzos. And it's hard to quite tell on video here, but most leather boots that you find, and I can show you guys an example here with the 442 and with the AS6 and with the Mizunos. Most leather boots, the upper is pretty padded. So you get kind of this thick, plush feel. But when it comes to the Lenzos, they don't feel like that at all. The leather that's used in these boots is razor thin. I'm talking about like a millimeter or less. So these boots, they wrap around your feet very tightly, almost like a glove, and leave no extra space whatsoever. And they have a decent amount of volume within them too. So I didn't notice any pressure points towards the toe box in terms of width. I felt like I had a ton of space. I will note that they do run pretty insanely long. So I typically wear a 10.5 US, and I got these in a 9.5. And that sizing worked for me. So I would definitely recommend, if you're interested in any of the models from Adler, I'll hopefully be reviewing more of them soon, I would go a full size down from whatever your US sizing is. But from a comfort perspective, I think that they can trump any boot on this list. And from a performance and what they're like to play in perspective, I think they also trump every boot on this list. Just shooting, passing, playing in these boots, they're just so fun. You pretty much forget that you're wearing anything on your feet. The lockdown is great. The traction is great. I love the sole plate. I think it strikes a good balance of giving you stability while also giving you a little bit of flexion as well. Adler Lenzo, I honestly can't say enough great things about them. I do wish they had more colorways because right now it's only white, red, and black. I'm really hoping to get, I heard they have like a turquoise one in the making, which I'm really excited to see. But right now, the Adler Lenzo, it's going top of the S tier pretty easily too. And by the way, most important thing I didn't even mention yet, these are going to be about $160. Around 100, might be 150, and then $20 for shipping. So all in all, you're probably going to be set back $170, which for boots of this quality, I think is going to be a steal. Now, next up on our list, we've got a boot where I should have the review dropping probably in the next day or two, and that's going to be the AS6 DS Light X Fly 5. They really got to work on maybe shortening that name, like either just DS Light or X Fly 5. I don't know why. Like, the name doesn't have to be 6 words, you know? But this boot shares a lot of similarities with the Mizuno that we went over earlier, the Neo 4 Beta Elite, although this one is going to have a traditional lacing system, the one from ASICS here. And this is the first ASICS football boot that I have ever tried on, and I was really impressed. Now, I've had good impressions from ASICS in the past because they make great sneakers and running shoes, and I had a few pairs of their sneakers. I had the Gel Light 3s, which are one of my favorite sneakers I've ever owned. You can check them out. They have this cool like split tongue design. Super comfortable. So I knew that ASICS had a good reputation, and they definitely held up that reputation with their football boots. These are going to retail from anywhere from $150 to $200. They're also going to bring you a soft leather toe box that transitions to a synthetic midfoot, really soft suede-like inner liner towards the heel area, and then a pretty innovative sole plate too. And I touch on this in my full review, but you may think from a distance that these are just simple conical studs, but if you get close enough, I hope you guys can see there are really small indentations around these studs that just make them a little bit more aggressive, and I like that. They also have a nice bend right behind the toe box, which is exactly where you want it. That's where the balls of your feet are going to be bending when you're running. And look at this little reinforcement there. Reinforcement stud to connect the sole plate to the upper. Got one here and another one here. That's a great feature that helps prevent sole separation over time. The width of these is going to be relatively average. I don't think that they're any wider than Mizuno's. In fact, I think that the width is very similar in the toe box. But I will note, since these do have some leather in the toe box, they'll stretch over time. So most foot shapes, these are going to work for. And for the ASICS, I'm going to put them in the A tier, just behind the Mizuno's, because I think it's really, really close. Really, really close. But I think the Mizuno, the Neo 4 Betas, might just have the slight edge compared to the ASICS. And then next up, this was a fun inclusion here because you may be thinking you're seeing double with another F50, but this is the F50 League. So this is the 3rd tier takedown of the Adidas F50 series, and it retails for $90. So it's actually, I think, probably the cheapest football boot on this entire list. And the reason why I wanted to include it was to show you, one, sometimes cheaper football boots are just better than more expensive ones. And, sometimes that can be easy to forget. And just because a boot is over $150 doesn't necessarily mean it'll be better than a $100 boot. And in the case of the F50 League, this was the best $90 football boot I tried on all year. It is super comfortable. It still has an impressively thin upper, despite the fact that 3rd tier takedowns are often a little bit bulky. It's got a really soft heel liner, great lockdown around the ankle and the heel area. No pressure points whatsoever in the toe box, midfoot, or any part of the foot whatsoever. And they're just great football boots. And the quality on these is so high that if you had handed these to me 1 or 2 years ago and told me this is Adidas's new top-end football boot, I probably would have believed you. And I would have thought that they retailed for $220, $230. So an amazing football boot. I would put, personally, the Adidas F50 League. Not quite as good as the Messi Pro variation, but I would put them A tier. And I put them right up with the Nike Premier 3s in terms of just great football boots that are at that $100 price range or so. And then finally, last boot on our list, we have one that I reviewed, must be coming up on a year ago, and this is the Puma Future 7 Pro. So this is a full knit upper football boot, so it really goes all in on that sock-like design. Puma pretty much pioneered, you know, the sock-like football boot with the Future series, and they've got a unique feel to them. I mean, I give Puma credit here. I think the Future series is the best line that they currently have. Although I will say I think Puma's kind of struggling right now because the Ultra series and the King series, in my opinion, are just not great offerings. But the Future is very comfortable when you get them on feet. You really notice the stretch throughout the upper. They're decent for wide-footed players as well, although the toe box, like some of the other options on here, does taper quite aggressively. My only con I had with the Future 7s is that because they are so soft and so stretchy with that upper, I think they sacrifice a little bit of lockdown, and you can only get so much lockdown out of the really minimal lacing system they put on there. I think the laces on the Future, they go across the top of your feet like 2 or 3 times, and then you tie them tight and kind of hope for the best. It's kind of just a give and take relationship Puma have with, they're trying to make the upper as stretchy and as soft as possible, but at a certain point, you lose a little bit of lockdown, I think, towards the heel. And that's why, for me, I'd put them in B tier. Still a really comfortable football boot. And if the sizing is perfect for you, and your toes are going just up to the end, and you feel that you have great lockdown in the heel, they're definitely going to be a great option for you. And guys, there we have it. That is going to do it for our tier list of the best football boots under $200. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. And just as a final note, I do want to say I actually think all of the boots on this list are really solid, maybe with the exception of the Magnetico Pro 4. That one probably isn't one that I would recommend, but other than that, almost all the other boots on this list I think would be a really great option. And if you have enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a like. It's one of the best ways to support the channel, and also subscribe, because at 20,000 subscribers, which should be coming up in the next month or so, we are going to be doing a giveaway for a new pair of football boots, and all you have to do is be subscribed and click the link below to enter. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.